Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event. We're coming to you from Alliance Magazine in London, and we're being joined by our expert speakers in Latin America, as well as you, our friends and colleagues from all around the world. I'm Elika Ruhi, the digital editor at Alliance and the moderator of today's webinar, which is part of Alliance at 25, a celebration of Alliance's 25 years at the heart of global philanthropy. This event is one in a series of discussions that will explore what the future of philanthropy holds in different regions of the world. Today, we'll be looking at Latin America with panelists Carolina Suarez, Magdalena Aninat, and Inez Mindlin-Lafer. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the Institute for the Development of Social Investment in Brazil for partnering with us on the production of today's event. You'll hear from Paola Fabiani, the CEO of IDIS, in a minute with some opening remarks. But first, just a few notes for everyone attending today before we start our main event. For our audience, go ahead and say hello in our chat on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll be keeping an eye on this throughout the webinar, and if you have any questions that you'd like to ask our panelists, make sure to ask them here. You can also join the discussion on Twitter with @AllianceMag and using the hashtag LatAmPhilanthropy, which you should be able to see at the bottom of the slides being shown on the screen. Also on the panel on the right-hand side, you can find under the offers tab the opportunity to subscribe to us at a 20% webinar discount just for all of you attending this event today. As a registered charity, Alliance generates much of our income, but we still rely on generous support to keep bringing you trusted, independent, and expert insight. To get your 20% discount on an Alliance subscription, use the offers button, which you can see on the right-hand side of your screen below the chat function. With a subscription, you'll be able to read our exciting new issues this year and our exclusive online content. And finally, Alliance is currently running a survey asking readers to reflect on the past 25 years of philanthropy. The results of the survey will be published in our special 100th issue coming in September. For anyone who's interested in participating in the survey, we'll share the link in the webinar chat. And now I'd like to turn things over to our partner, IDIS CEO, Paola Fabiani, who will share some thoughts on what she thinks the future of philanthropy in Latin America may hold.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Elika, for the introduction. And I would like to thank a lot Alliance Magazine for this partnership to debate the future of philanthropy in Latin America. And also welcome and thanks to my colleagues and friends Inez, Carolina, and Magdalena for being here today and joining us in this debate. So, just in my initial remarks, I must say that giving in Latin America is not so developed as in other parts of the world. As we can see, the World Giving Index presents many of the Latin American countries, and the variation in positioning in 126 countries is from 41 with Chile to 108 Venezuela, and Brazil ranking number 8 in this list of countries, positioning in the 74th position. Some believe that is the regulatory environment in the region that's not so favorable. Others point out very strongly that is a cultural matter. But the fact is, there is room for improvement, and I think this is the good news. I'm going to stop sharing and then just talk a little bit of some trends and information about this topic. I'd like to also mention the WINGS report, Access to Resources for Civil Society Organizations in Latin America, that shows that half of Latin American civic space is now restricted. And funds are going, most of the funds go to education, which becomes a big challenge to climate, environment and climate, and also some other topics as gender and racial equity, issues of great importance in the region. I also like to mention the pandemic in that regard, because the importance of civil society organizations in the region during the pandemic was really highlighted because they were the first to react and reach the most vulnerable with incredible initiatives and collaborative efforts to support the ones that needed the most. And funders came right after, supporting initiatives And lastly, I have to mention the corporations, who played a big role and increased donations dramatically. There was an unprecedented giving by corporations during the pandemic. And finally, just to point out, to highlight some of the trends that we see about the philanthropic landscape in the region. First, and this was really accelerated by the pandemic, is technology is here to stay. Most of the organizations are adopting technological mechanisms, and technology is really helping the sector to evolve. Data has become even more relevant. So funders and organizations are looking how to generate more data, and also how to measure the impact they're generating on our societies. Another important trend that is relevant in the last years is the participation of the next generation of philanthropists. They are getting even more involved in the last years, and the fact that with the pandemic, it became clear how it is important to act local. So community philanthropy is on the rise, and solutions for territories. How can we solve the problems in specific regions? Because the demands are very specific in each place, in each territory. And another point that I wanted to highlight is the emergence of new mechanisms in the last years. We have Carolina here to talk about venture philanthropy, but we also see how the sector has been debating blended finance that brings philanthropic capital together with social investment to create positive impact, and other mechanisms that have emerged in the last years. And finally, but not least important, collaboration. This was really key during the pandemic, and I believe that this is also a trend that's here to stay. There is no other way for us to really reach the solutions we need, especially after this catastrophic period that we have experienced with the pandemic. So collaboration is key. And with that, I'd like to pass back to Elika to continue with our debate.
Thank you so much, Paula. I think there's a lot that you just shared that we'll be able to explore today. But first, I would like to hand the floor over to Inez. Oh, sorry. First, I'd like to introduce our panel, which includes today Carolina Suarez, who joins us from Colombia. She's the CEO of Latimpacto, which is the Latin American Venture Philanthropy Network. Magdalena Aninat, who's the founding director of the Center for Philanthropy and Social Investments at Adolfo Ibáñez University in Chile, and Inez Mindlin Lafer, who leads the Betty and Jacob Lafer Institute and serves as the chair of the board of GFI, and who joins us from Brazil. So we're very excited to have all of you with us today. And I'd like to hand the floor over now to Inez. From your perspective as the director of a family foundation based in Brazil, and also your involvement with GFI, could you share with us your reflections on where you think philanthropy in Brazil is headed? Sorry, Inez, I think you may be on mute. Is it, if you try refreshing your screen, sometimes it will reset the audio, but your microphone button should be blue. Yeah. Sorry, friends, just bear with us a minute while we sort out some technical difficulties. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
So thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to thank this invitation. And I by now, just a small correction, I'm a board member of GFI, not the chair of GFI. And so before I start, I'm not so comfortable to speak in English, but I'll do my best. And well, I would like to talk a little bit about philanthropy here in Brazil. And I think it's important to say that for the last, I guess, 20, 25 years, I think we were able to build a philanthropic infrastructure here. I think the sector got more professional. We have all kind of technical assistance that one might need. We have NGOs and foundations dealing with a lot of causes and subjects. And I think when I was thinking about this panel, I realized that I am like in a turning point, because I'm working in the sector for the last 20 years. And so I'm not new generation anymore. And I think over these years, we were very focused in building this philanthropic infrastructure. I think also we were focused in this idea of building the philanthropic infrastructure after Brazilian redemocratization. So we were concerned about designing public policies with civil society participations. So we stressed like training process, pilot projects that could inspire public policies or give new ideas. And I think we had some advance and some defeats in this task during these years. I guess also more recently, I see here in Brazil a more consistent movement to value grant making and private donations. And I think, as Paula just mentioned, I think COVID-19 put a spotlight on that because we had an increase of private donations. But still, I think we have room to grow more in this issue. I think especially when it comes about individual private donations, I think we can increase the participation of society. I'm personally committed with this challenge, as many other people that wants to bring our elite to be more protagonists in the social change that we want to see. I see a new generation in philanthropy coming up that I guess they are more aware about the importance of donation. And I see them very driven by this idea of impact, of scaling up the initiatives they are involved with, by the idea of having a consistent business model. And I see this new generation very close to the ideas of impact investing and ESG. But no matter what generation you belong here in Brazil, I think it will be important for the next years to deal with anti-racism, climate change, deforestation, violence. And also, I think we should put all our efforts to reduce inequalities, I think, in the country and in the region. When it comes also about innovations, it's something that Alliance asked me. I think I'm not the best person to talk about that, but I would highlight these coalitions, networks, and alliance that were, I think, that made possible some agendas to be pushed and to advance, and also some specific funds to be set up, working with a strategic causes, just like gender or climate, human rights. And I think last year we saw the importance of having NGOs and in the community that had capillarity to really reach who was needing assistance. And I think this is, I don't know if this is an innovation, but I think we saw the value of this kind of thing here in our country. And I think, for just to conclude, I think we are in a delicate moment here in Brazil, because we need to push the philanthropic agenda, but also I think we need to avoid the setbacks in terms of civic space. I think civil society was very key to rebuild democracy in the country and to expand rights as a public policy. And right now, I think the value of civil society, of independent media, science, and these things that were very important some years ago, are under attack. And I think we, as philanthropics sector, I think we have a role on that. And I think we need to work and we need to fund and to foster initiatives that can avoid this kind of setbacks. I think it's a pity that we are seeing here in Brazil setbacks also in terms of poverty and hunger, and I think we can't shut our eyes to that. But if I say for the next years, I think philanthropy in Brazil and in the region, I think we need to pay attention and to fund initiatives to avoid closing civic space. So I think that's it. I hope we go through this pandemic times safe and soon. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Inés. Before we head on to our next speaker, we'd like to share a poll question with our audience. So you can see the poll question if you look on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a tab that says poll. So our question is, in your opinion, what should be Latin America's priorities for funding over the coming decade? And there's a number of options, including education, health, economic inclusion, human rights, social justice and democracy, climate and environment, arts and culture, or other. And if you have selected other, go ahead and share your insights in the chat. We'd love to hear them, but we'll leave the poll open for a little bit to give people a chance to respond. Okay, I'm just about to close the poll. All right, so it looks like a couple things are in the lead. Social justice and democracy, 31%. And after that was education, 26%. And after that was climate, 22%. So we'll come back to this idea of what should be the funding priority for Latin America. But before that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Carolina. So it would be great to hear your thoughts on some of these same questions that we've been talking about, but from your point of view with Latimpacto. So what do you think about the trends and trajectory of philanthropy in Latin America?
Elika, thank you very much. It is a pleasure to participate in this panel with this incredible woman in the region. Congratulations for the 25th anniversary of Alliance. And I really appreciate this opportunity to share with all of the colleagues that are connected today and friends, of course, and how we can reflect together, how we can promote a better deployment of the philanthropic resources to achieve a more significant impact. So I just will start from our view, from the venture philanthropy approach, investing for impact. But for us, and for me particularly, Latin America is a region full of opportunities. So this is how we want to drive this network, and is what I want to share with you today. So Latimpacto is a network. We started a year ago in April 2020. And now we have an incredible team, governance, and we have delivered activities and initiatives that cover the whole region, from Mexico to La Patagonia, including the Caribbean countries. So the idea, as our sister networks in Europe and Asia, AVPA and AVPN, as well as our sister network in Africa, AVPA, we mobilize providers of social investment capital. And the idea is how we can promote a more efficient deployment of financial and non-financial resources, and how we can promote a long-term social and environmental impact. So we believe that we need to prioritize in environmental and social impact, connecting the entire continuum of capital, connecting different providers of capital. Not only, for me, is philanthropy is an synonym of foundation. You can deliver philanthropy using different vehicles, and how we can operate in a region way is how we can connect the Latin American countries in a more proactive and strategic way, and also how we can connect with the largest community of global social investors with our sister networks. So we are part of a global movement, although we are an independent network. We want to improve this connection with the world taking into account that they have a lot of practices that we can bring, and also they can learn that Latin America is a region full of opportunities. So I just want to focus this presentation as to show you our most important findings in our report that we recently launched in last February, Social Investment and Impact Cases and Trends in Latin America. So this research, we did this research with more than 180 interviews. We identified more than 100 cases, and we documented 37 cases across the region from 7 countries: Mexico, Guatemala, Brazil, Argentina, Peru, Colombia, and Chile. And I just want to share with you what we found in these 37 cases. There are the cases, and we have a website that you can check in detail. All the cases are in Portuguese, Spanish, and English, so you can check all these cases. But let me see some trends, and actually following with your question, what is the SDG that philanthropy are addressing? So we found that most of them are focused on SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, and the second one is no poverty, following but reducing inequalities. Paula and Inés both mentioned about the crisis created by the pandemic, but we are also seeing that this pandemic has been an opportunity for philanthropists to rethink how they will deliver philanthropy and how they will deploy their resources in a more strategic way. So one finding shows that investing for impact is gaining traction in the region. Investors for impact that we include in this report includes banks, impact funds, foundations, family offices, government agencies, and other types of organizations. And we found that all of them are committed to prioritize social and environmental impact over financial returns. Is what we are finding from the pandemic, how they want to increase their support. The second one is how they are also improving the way that they give financial instruments. And actually, it was one of the issues that Paula mentioned before about blended finance. So we are still have grants, but we are starting to implement that, equity, and other hybrid mechanisms. So it's how the way that we are starting to understand that we can apply different financial instruments to deploy our philanthropic work. The second graphic that I want to share with you is how we are giving non-financial support and how we understand that non-financial support is strategic for achieving impact. So we are seeing here that all philanthropists are also supporting the strategy of the social purpose organizations, also supporting the impact measurement, but also supporting the operational issues at the social purpose organizations. In this graphic, the next one, you will see how the measurement of the social purpose organizations is increasing. So if almost 60% of the organizations that are included in our case studies, they are measuring their impact. So we find organizations like Evento in Brazil, FISA Medis in Chile, Bancolombia Foundation in Colombia, ICE Foundation, and all the 37 foundations. They are not only providing grants, and they are also innovating in the way that they promote philanthropy. And just to finish, and I'm open for more questions, is I want to share with you, sorry, the next slide, is our reflections. So our reflection is first, is that Latin America is keen to move forward to a more strategic philanthropy. We have found that we have more philanthropists and more impact investors ready to take more risks and committed to prioritize social and environmental impact over financial returns. We also found that we have more actors involved in the social investment ecosystem, not only foundations, so we are increasing the pie, and also the way that how we can connect in a more strategic way the continuum of capital. So from the traditional philanthropy to the impact investing. It's how we can connect, and we can have two words, black and white. It's how we can connect these worlds in one world and how we can deploy these resources in a more strategic way. So happy to answer all questions. I have a quote that I want to share with you. is how we're seeing the future of philanthropy. So we found that we have an increasing number of investors that are attracted by the idea of doing good while achieving financial return, but also we found traditional grant-making foundations that are increasingly giving grants in a long-term and sustainable way, and also how they are implementing new financial instruments. As I mentioned before, you can find all the information of our research in English, Portuguese, and Spanish at our website, and happy to answer all questions that you can have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carolina. I think somebody also in the chat shared the link to your report, and I also wanted to mention that you and your colleague shared some analysis of the findings of the report on Alliance last week. So there's also an article there for anyone who's interested in learning more. So now I'd like to hear from Magdalena. Could you share with us your insights on the role of philanthropy infrastructure in Latin America?
Thank you, Elika, and thank you for this invitation. Congratulations all for the anniversary. And let me add to Paula, Inés, and Carolina's presentation, which I have a lot of agreements on trends, but some additional thoughts on the future of philanthropy for the region. And I think we cannot start this reflection without having on the table that it has been a year since COVID-19 was declared a pandemic, and that it really will change or impact the future of philanthropy or the present of philanthropy. The setback in overcoming poverty we are experiencing, and the loss, the diseases, the people in lockdown here in Chile, where 90% of the population is in lockdown right now, impeded to go to school, to attend work, though we are in a process of vaccination. But this setdown will require more institutions providing effective solutions, and which cannot be supplied solely by governments. Philanthropy has a key role to play, we know that, and we've seen this strong mobilization of funding in 2020 for COVID relief, $600 million for Latin America, and we in Chile estimate this will be 2020 will probably be one of the highest years with amount of donations registered. So this is great news, but however, civil society has also, organizations has also been hit very hard by the pandemic. Thousands of organizations has been impeded to provide services, to receive revenues, to continue fundraising, and maybe the most affected ones are not the one providing solutions in basic needs, but the one providing other types of solutions for climate change, for culture and arts, that we know are important also for a healthy society. Let me bring some data. The Center for Disaster Relief can estimate between 11 to 38% of nonprofits in the US could come to an end as a result of this crisis. We don't have the data for the region, but things could go in the same direction or worse. And then philanthropy must be a key player in sustainable recovery. But to be a key player, I think it's important to have in this conversation a reflection on the needs of philanthropy for itself, a space to improve its practices, to have strong voice, to advocate for an environment that will help both philanthropy and civil society flourish, as Inés mentioned, and networks to expand connection, as Carolina has shown. This is where, of course, foundations, association of foundations, researchers, academics, and affinity groups play an important role. So this is where infrastructure philanthropy is needed. We have seen, as the slide shows in this study from Wings, that infrastructure for philanthropy has grown, has had an expansion from the beginning of the millennium. And if we see let's say the last 5 years, we have also witnessed a growing effort in this direction in the region. here the panelists today are an example of this. We have more research, more associations of peer entity, more regional affinity groups than we did a decade ago. And this is really good news. And let me show that although we have advanced in this, Latin America is one of the least regions covered in this research and in these teaching activities. So there's a lot of space to grow, and there's a need to grow. An example of this is this effort from the University Adolfo Ibáñez, the Center for Philanthropy, where we work improving the environment of the sector, not just doing something, but connecting academics to improve the sector and to connect different actors. So I also see in Chile more impact-driven donors, next-gen philanthropists actively involved, impact investors, and moving from one way to another, including new types of collaborations and instruments. Technology slowly coming in. But I would like to finish these opening words with putting on the table three main challenges that should shape the near future of philanthropy. I think philanthropy needs to promote funding to root causes. If we start addressing systemic change in not just immediate needs, as we've seen a lot last year, communities and people will be more prepared for an eventual next disaster or catastrophe. We have a lot of catastrophe in Chile and I think in the region, instability. And these changes requires time, innovation, and the best people. And that is where philanthropy can have really add value. Philanthropy practices needs to be more collaborative. I think one of the greatest lessons learned is that collaboration can and is possible. It's not just necessary, it is possible. We've seen that last year and we're still seeing it. And finally, I think what Ines mentioned, the sector needs to advocate and invest in this kind of institution for a legal framework that facilitates the work of civil society and promotes giving. The Global Philanthropy Environment Index from the Liddy School of Philanthropy at Indiana University has identified that political environment and tax incentives are the two main weaknesses for philanthropy development in the region. And we've seen a lot of these examples in the region of how governments can regulate towards facilitating or impeding the role of civil society and philanthropy. So law should facilitate donations whether they come from high-income individuals, corporations, middle-class donors, and incorporate these new trends, impact investment, social impact bonds. We need more and intelligent capital coming from these big challenges we have in the region. And for these three main challenges, we need more philanthropy, but we need also infrastructure organizations that can provide an increase on these challenges. So thank you. I'm happy to answer new questions.
Thank you, Magdalena. So we're going to open up our panel now to a Q&A. So just a reminder to everyone that if you have a question for any of our panelists, go ahead and share it in the chat and we'll do our best to put as many of them as possible to our expert speakers today. But maybe first we can sort of take this first question to set the scene. So I think, Magdalena, you just mentioned philanthropy needs to be a key player in sustainable recovery. And I'm wondering, looking at the region, what philanthropists and foundations do you think are leading the way in Latin America?
I think something that is really interesting is that half of the institutional philanthropy in Chile, as a study we did with colleagues from Peru, Colombia, Mexico, and Argentina, showed that half of the institutional philanthropy, let's say private foundations, were created in the last 20 years. So we have a really emerging sector that can really be change maker. So when you're starting, you're more open to change. So we've seen a lot of that. We've seen, I think, one of a good example is a consortium of foundations that are open to work really in a horizontal way with nonprofits and with community-based foundations. The Fondo Respuesta Comunitaria in Chile, it's a group of foundations working with these social neighbors, organized, providing food and health for their neighbors, what we call ollas comunes. Another example of this consortium of organizations are organizations that are working to start the social impact bonds in Chile and in Colombia as well. I think that kind of organizations that are not putting their name and logo first, but they are putting the cause and the problem they are trying to address, opening to think about new channels, new instruments, open to risk, are the one that will be really change makers. And we have in this emerging sector the opportunity to have more of that key players.
Yeah, it's great to hear of some of these initiatives. I want to I'll put this next question to Inez, but I want to refer to something that you mentioned when you were answering this question, which is that many of the philanthropic organizations in Latin America have been founded in the past 20 years. And I know GIFI put out some research this year, I think it was quite recent, which found that they conducted their census, and looking at the last decade, family associations and foundations grew between 8% and 22% in responding to their research. So this is just responding to their research, but it could also indicate several things, like a growth in the number of family foundations or a growth in engagement among family foundations. And I'm wondering, since you work at a family foundation, have you noticed this growth in the sector and among your peers? Is that's something that's also clear to you on the ground?
Thanks. Yes, I think we started, Instituto Beth Jacob, we have, this is our 10th year. And I think for the lately, we saw an increase of family foundations. And I think a good thing about that is that family foundations can take more risk, because we are not so close to the business, to the family business, and so we can innovate and be more risky. And I think this is something to value. And I see new different family foundations being born after us, and there was others before we started. So, but I think it's important to say that GIFI is a part of our philanthropic universe. Not all the foundations are associated. So I think it's GIFI research is a part of what we live here and what we see. And there are other researches. Of course, we don't have many data here in Brazil, and we should have more. And I guess Paula is here to say, maybe because IDIS is very involved in this idea of producing knowledge for the field. And I just would like to say that I couldn't agree more with Madalena about the topics, this idea of working with systemic changes and causes, because I think we really need to address, because problems are not, we have specific problems and immediate problems due to anything and due to pandemic. But I think we won't solve all the things if we don't look to the systemic changes and to the roots of the many inequalities that we face here. And I think also we have room here in Brazil to improve our legal framework to philanthropy. So despite the fact that I think we professionalize the philanthropic sector in the last years, I think we can improve our system. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to put the next question to Carolina, and I'd like to sort of revisit this question of what philanthropists and foundations are leading the way in Latin America. But my follow-up question is sort of related to the poll that we did earlier, which found that most of us in attendance today felt that social justice and democracy should be the priority for funding. And I'm wondering, looking at these organizations that you see leading the way in Latin America, does that sort of align with their funding priorities?
Thank you, Elika. So first, let me to ask you to your last question about the priorities. For me, I think that in Latin America, we have a lot of problems, now even more with the pandemic. So we cannot address all the causes in any specific issue. For me, social justice and democracy is a priority, but we cannot dismiss our SDGs. So right now, I think we should follow the SDG agenda, and we will need to see how we can address these global targets. And actually, I was seeing some questions from the UN, how we can work in a more strategic way with the UN agencies and the philanthropy, how we can align in a better way. So the second is which philanthropies and foundations are leading the way in Latin America? I think that the ones that are understanding the change, that are adapting their strategies to the new reality. So Paula mentioned about using data, having data, using technology, even more now that we should use technology, is how we can involve more transparency in the practices, how we can start using more financial instruments. I saw several questions about how the situation of fundraising in Latin America, grants are very limited, but we need to understand that philanthropy is not that we should understand philanthropy beyond of grants. We can, right now, we have the possibility to implement new financial instruments to create social and environmental impact. It's how we can innovate in the way that we provide this non-financial support. It's how we give the support to these organizations, to the NGOs in a more strategic way, and how we can collaborate with others. And Magdalena mentioned, it's also part of our reflections of our study, that we need more collaboration, not only in the same silo, not only between among foundations, but also among different people that are eager to create more impact, social and environmental impact in Latin America. It's how we can connect better our region. And I'm happy to have this webinar with you, with people from Brazil, from Chile, having people from different countries across the region and from Europe as well. And it's how we can discuss together, how we can promote a better deployment of the resources. I think it's the way that we need to think right now.
Yeah, so speaking about innovation, we've received a question from Pablo Marçal from the University of Buenos Aires, who asks, one of the main issues in Argentina, and I presume in the rest of Latin America, is the lack of precise information that tracks donations from donors to recipients, such as what Candid tracks in the United States. And he asks, what is the situation now in your countries? And I'm asking as well, what can be done to encourage greater transparency? So maybe Magdalena, you can speak to this question.
Oh, such a big question and a lot of work. And we do a lot of work with this. And I think this is really important to have to work in two levels. I think it is important to have tax or a legal framework that really promotes philanthropy and also provides more transparency on philanthropy. If we have tax incentives, well, we're using indirectly part of public funding that is not received by the government to incentivize private giving. So it is important as well to have not just a framework that promotes, but that builds transparency, and that transparency is a way of building legitimacy, trust. And we have in Chile, but I know that this is a Latin American problem, we have a lot of mistrust towards institutions. So no, we're not beside that. The nonprofit sector, the philanthropy sector has to engage in that in that cost on building this trust. So the second way is to build this knowledge from providing data in an aggregate way, so we can have diagnosis like this to show where are the advanced and what are we missing in providing this funding. So I think it is really important, and it's something that infrastructure has provided, but we have a lot to grow.
Can I compliment, Erika?
Yes, please.
Yes. Yeah, in Brazil, for example, we don't declare our giving. Individuals don't declare the giving because we don't have tax incentives for giving. So there's no point, you don't have any benefit in declaring a donation. That makes it really hard to track what is donated. Imagine tracking where it is donated to. But I think there is a lot of room for improvement if we improve the regulatory environment in that regard, so that we can track giving even more. We are doing the Brazil Giving Research this year to track what was given during the pandemic from individuals, because we have no data at all from individuals in Brazil to track how much is given. But I believe that having better channels to track where the money is flowing to, the government has some of this data, but it's very minimum how much they provide and how much we can have access to such information. So we have lots of initiatives that are advocating for that. We have the movement for a culture of giving, who also advocates for a better regulatory environment, and also speaking about giving for the SDGs, or as Carolina mentioned, the importance of all of us tracking the SDGs and collaborating towards the achievement of the SDGs. We just launched the Catalyst 2030 movement here in Brazil, which is a group of social entrepreneurs that want to collaborate. We talked a lot about that, towards the achievement of the SDGs. And one thing that the group discussed a lot is, okay, we need a platform for data. So information is key, so that with information we can certainly design better strategies to achieve what the challenges that we have ahead. And another thing that I think for Brazil can improve the environment for giving is the fact that we have a legislation for building endowments. And in that regard, especially for the donations that have any giving incentive, with that we can track a little bit of such money that goes to, it's just for the cultural sector, but it's a start. But I think for every area in Brazil, we have specific legislation for each area. We needed something broader and a framework for the philanthropic sector that could improve the sector as a whole. And as Magdalena mentioned, we are young. We're just starting to walk in the philanthropic field. We are, when you think about philanthropy globally, we have other countries that have been in this journey much longer than Latin American countries.
Can I add just a small thing? Because I think this idea of tracking the donations is not only important as a transparent issue, but also as an example, because I think people here in Brazil, many times they don't declare that they donate. So I think if people are more comfortable in declaring how much and for whom they donate, they give an example and they bring more people to donate to philanthropy.
And I think that following with the idea of Inés, I agree with that when we talk about transparency, we are saying, okay, what laws we have, our rules, but I think that to ensure best philanthropic practice and accountability to the society, I think that the responsibility is under the leaders of each organization. So it's not a responsibility from the Congress, it's not a responsibility from the government, it's our own responsibility as philanthropists. is how each organization, its own leaders, should be the ones that promote the implementation of best accountability and transparency practices. So it's the way that how we can bring in for example, with Latimpacto, is how we can connect these financial principles from the venture capital to the philanthropies, how we can apply the same rigorosity to philanthropy, the more rigorous practices, and how we can create more impact with these practices. So I think it's a reflection that each philanthropist should have in their own entity. Because all the time we are talking about transparency, we're saying, okay, maybe the government will have a new law or the Congress. No, it's our own responsibility.
Thank you all for sharing thoughts on this question. I think transparency is not just a problem that needs to be solved in Latin America. It's a question in the sector globally, but especially for in Latin America, where many of the organizations and institutions are young. I think that it's an important question to be asking. So I'd like to turn now to a question from Ana Barreto from Brazil, who represents Afro Resistance, an organization that organizes for democracy, human rights, and racial justice. So she asks, how small and community-based Indigenous and Black organizations could receive sustainable international funding without the intermediary model? Normally, a bigger and more traditional organization works as an intermediate between funders and community-based organizations. I believe a new model could strengthen small organizations and increase impacts to the most needed. So I'm wondering, maybe Inez, you could speak to this question.
I don't know if I have the answer to this question, but just try to share some thoughts, because I think it's, first of all, I think there are some causes that it's quite hard to look at them as a sustainable causes that they can generate money or they can be funded by others than a philanthropist, because there are areas that they don't generate money and they need to be funded because they do an important work. I think the foundations, like the big foundations right now that are working in the human rights field, they are struggling themselves to be able to be more close to this organizations in the field, because I think there is a perception right now that, okay, we need the big NGOs dealing with human rights issues, considering human rights in their expand ideas. But of course, we also need, it's an ecosystem, the small organizations. And I think the big foundations are struggling themselves to see how they can support this kind of organizations and still having all their management criteria and all the steps that they have to fund, because, sorry, but the idea of being able to support an NGO that has less management structure, but I don't know if we have the answer right now. I think we are trying to do that with intermediaries and also directly, but I think we are in the mid of the road.
Elika, I will invite Anna to think its own strategy. I think it's not a problem of your focus, or that you are focusing on human rights, racial justice. I think it's how international cooperation is seen and international funders are seeing Latin America right now. So I will invite Anna from Brazil and all NGOs that are asking how I can receive more fundraising from other foundations in my country or international funding, is to check their own strategy, to check their theory of change, is how they can approach, is how they can ask for more financial support, even beyond grants. Because as I mentioned before, we cannot limit philanthropy to grants. So I will invite Anna to think about its own strategy, the strategy of the organization, and we're happy to collaborate with that. It's something that we are promoting with our investors, and it's something that we want to expand to teach some NGOs how they can approach philanthropists and social investors, what they are looking for when they want to invest in an NGO, but looking beyond grants, the classic philanthropy, the classic grants.
Can I add?
Yeah, go ahead, Paula.
Okay, it's just that maybe focusing also on the ESG agenda. Actually, the S is very local, and many companies are now looking into issues that they didn't look before, internally and externally, how they support civil society in improving racial equity, in improving other human rights aspects of our society. In that regard, they're going to have to fund social organizations that are working in communities and that are working closer to the population in that regards that cause. So I would also like complementing Carolina's point, open up a little bit and look, maybe the SG is also an opportunity, many of us.
Yes, and maybe, Magdalena, do you have any comments on this question, or perhaps do you want to sort of tie it to what you've seen funders do over the last year that you're hoping will be taken forward?
Let me add a legal issue. I agree with what Ines and Paula and Carolina has said, but I think regarding the legal issues, there's an interesting study that the Lilly School of Philanthropy did on international or cross-border giving. So if we're thinking on international giving, that is something that we need to really look at also when we're thinking about how the environment of where philanthropic giving and civil society organizations can flourish has to have a legal environment that facilitates that. That is not always the reality in a lot of our countries. So that is something that I would add. Not easy to and not the issue of one little organization. And the other thing is that maybe I think something that was mentioned before about the territorial, I think, Paula, you mentioned this, the territorial or the local development. There's an interesting change, and we have in Chile, also in the region, there's a initial movement on developing community foundations. We have a lot of them in Mexico. There's an effort going around in Chile. We're part of that. In Colombia, in Peru. So that is something that is really interesting to look at, and how do we address like the needs of a community. And if there are needs of a community, that's something about race or indigenous people, that is something that is another way of thinking, how to gather different types of donors, a big company, but also professionals that are related to a community that will like to address the health and development of a community. So there's something that I could add to the question.
Thank you all for your insightful answers to this question and also all of our questions. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our hour. I know there were many excellent questions that we didn't get a chance to get to, but I hope everyone who's attended today has enjoyed our discussion. And if you found it helpful and engaging, don't forget to go to the offers section on the right of your screen, and you can get a 20% discount on any Alliance subscription. If you haven't done it yet, maybe because you were too busy listening, don't worry, we'll be sending out emails to you shortly with the discount code to get you started, and we'll also be sending around a recording of this digital event to everyone who registered. I'd like to end today by saying thank you to our expert panelists, Carolina, Magdalena, and Inez. Thank you to our partner, IDIS, and to Paula for joining us today to share her insights. Thank you to the Alliance team, and in particular, our marketing, advertising, and events manager, Amy McGoldrick, who has produced today's event. And thank you to all of you in attendance for being part of the Alliance community today. Our next webinar is in May. It looks at Shift the Power 5 years on, and our Future of Philanthropy series continues in July, when we'll take a look at what the next decades may hold for philanthropy in the US and Canada. And finally, keep an eye out for the next issue of Alliance, which explores climate philanthropy before COP26 in Glasgow and comes out in June. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Have a
It was
good day.
wonderful,
Bye-bye.
girls. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Nice to see you all. Bye.